Welcome to this thought-provoking exploration of one of the most challenging questions ever posed in theology and philosophy. If God is truly just, then why do the innocent suffer while the guilty prosper? This question cuts to the heart of religious belief. It shakes the very foundation of faith. For millennia, people have struggled to understand why, if there is an all-powerful, all-knowing, and perfectly just God, the world seems filled with injustice. Children suffer, the poor are exploited, animals are tortured, the environment is destroyed, and people who lie, cheat, and kill often rise to power and live in luxury. Let's begin with a simple observation. Look around. In nature, you'll see suffering at every level. A lion kills a gazelle not because it's evil, but because it's hungry. The gazelle suffers. A parasite may slowly eat the brain of an animal from inside. Diseases wipe out populations. Earthquakes bury people alive. Is this the design of a just and merciful creator? Religious people often claim that God is just, merciful, and loving. But then, why doesn't this justice appear in the real world? Why does it only seem to exist in holy books and sermons? Let's first explore this argument through the lens of philosophy, evolution, history, and atheism. Philosophers from ancient times to modern days have tried to understand this problem. It's called the problem of evil or the problem of suffering. Epicurus, a Greek philosopher, famously said, "Is God willing to prevent evil, but not able? Then he is not omnipotent. Is he able but not willing? Then he is malevolent. Is he both able and willing? Then whence cometh evil?" This is one of the earliest logical attacks on the idea of a perfectly good God. If such a God exists, then suffering, especially the suffering of the innocent, makes no sense. The only explanation would be that God is either not all-powerful or not all-good. Now, let's look at the perspective of Yuval Noah Harari, the author of Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind. Harari doesn't directly argue about God, but his work presents an indirect yet powerful critique. He explains that religion often emerged as a way to explain the unknown, justify power, and unite people. Religious stories provided moral structures, but also justified suffering, slavery, war, and inequality. According to Harari, gods were tools to keep people in line, not necessarily reflections of truth or justice. Think about this. Religion often tells people that their suffering is part of a divine plan, that it is a test, or that rewards will come after death. These stories provide comfort, but they also distract people from asking hard questions about injustice in the real world. Osho Rajneesh offers another perspective. He said religion has turned humanity into a slave of imaginary gods. Instead of fighting injustice, people are told to accept it as karma, fate, or divine will. Osho asked, if God is the creator of this world, he must be mad, because no sane and loving creator would make a world where millions of children die of hunger while billionaires bathe in champagne. Let's explore this argument in detail with historical and archaeological evidence. Consider ancient civilizations like Mesopotamia, Egypt, or the Aztecs. They believed gods demanded sacrifices to ensure good harvests and protect against disasters. People threw their own children into fire or cut out the hearts of prisoners to please gods. Were those gods just, or were they just human-made explanations for natural events? People didn't understand. History shows us that religious authorities often sided with the powerful and the corrupt. During the medieval era, kings ruled by divine right, claiming God had chosen them. The church supported this. The poor were told to suffer in silence because their reward was in heaven. Meanwhile, the guilty corrupt priests, tyrant kings, brutal emperors lived in palaces. If God were just, wouldn't we expect the innocent to thrive and the wicked to fall? But that's not what we see. We see genocides, like the Holocaust, where 6 million Jews, including children, were murdered. Where was God's justice then? Atheists often point to these examples as proof that either God doesn't exist, or if God exists, then he's not the all-loving, all-just deity religion describes. Now, let's look at nature and evolution. Evolution by natural selection, described by Charles Darwin, shows us that life evolves through competition, struggle, and death. The strongest survive, not the kindest. There is no justice in evolution. A baby bird falling from a nest may die simply because it was too weak. There's no divine plan behind that. It's just nature, random, blind, and indifferent. If God created this evolutionary system, then he created one based on suffering, extinction, and inequality. Why would a just God create a system where pain is the mechanism for progress? Now, let's shift the lens and explore the religious replies to this problem. What do religious people say when asked, if God is just, why do the innocent suffer? There are several common responses. 1. They say suffering is a test, that God tests people to strengthen their faith. But this raises problems. Why does God need to test people? Doesn't an all-knowing God already know who is faithful? And why do some people get harder tests than others? Why is a child born into famine while another is born into a billionaire family? 2. They say suffering is a punishment for sin. But what sin did a newborn baby commit? What about animals? Why do they suffer? They can't sin. Are they being punished too? 3. They claim we cannot understand God's plan, that human minds are too limited. This is known as the mystery of God's will. But this is a logical fallacy. It's called an argument from ignorance. Just because we don't know the reason doesn't mean there is one. This is like saying, I don't understand how lightning works, so it must be Zeus. Religion often uses gaps in knowledge to insert God. Atheists call this the God of the gaps fallacy. 4. They say justice will come in the afterlife, that good people will be rewarded in heaven, and bad people punished in hell. But this argument relies entirely on belief. There is no evidence of heaven or hell. It's a way of deferring justice into the future, a future we can't verify. It asks people to accept injustice now in exchange for an invisible promise later. Now, let's consider a simple story to explain this idea. Imagine a village where a child is born blind, hungry, and abused. She grows up suffering and dies young. Meanwhile, the man who tortured her becomes rich, powerful, and dies peacefully in his sleep. A priest tells the village, don't worry, the girl is in heaven now, and the man will burn in hell. But this is no comfort. It's a way to avoid the real question. Why did this happen in the first place? Why didn't God protect the innocent girl? Let's dig deeper. What about natural disasters? Earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanoes? They don't distinguish between good and evil. They kill everyone. In 2004, a tsunami killed over 230,000 people in Southeast Asia. Entire families were wiped out. Was that a test? A punishment? A mystery? Or was it just the indifferent movement of tectonic plates? Archaeologists studying ancient ruins have found entire civilizations destroyed by disasters. Pompeii buried in lava, the Indus Valley swallowed by climate change. No divine justice protected these people. Nature doesn't care who prays and who sins. Even in the animal kingdom, suffering is everywhere. A baby sea turtle hatches and is eaten before reaching the ocean. A wolf slowly starves in winter. A chimpanzee is killed by rivals. If God designed this system, he made it cruel by default. Atheist authors like Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, and Sam Harris have all argued that the existence of widespread suffering is incompatible with a benevolent deity. Dawkins once wrote, "The universe we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is, at bottom, no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference." Now, consider another religious defense. Free will. Some say humans cause suffering through their choices, and God allows it to preserve free will. But this doesn't explain natural disasters, animal suffering, or birth defects. And it doesn't explain why God would give humans the freedom to commit atrocities, but not the freedom to avoid being born into agony. Let's also look at Buddhist or Hindu perspectives. They introduce the concept of karma, that past actions, even from past lives, determine present suffering. But this is another way to blame the victim. It suggests people deserve their pain, even when they can't remember doing anything wrong. It also lacks evidence. We can't measure past lives or karmic balances. So where does this leave us? We are left with a world where the innocent do suffer, and the guilty do prosper. Not always, but often enough to raise serious questions about divine justice. If we take a purely naturalistic view, we can understand suffering without invoking a deity. Suffering is the result of biology, evolution, environment, and human choices. There is no grand plan, but we do have the power to reduce suffering. We can feed the hungry, treat the sick, protect the weak. We can create justice ourselves instead of waiting for a God to deliver it. Maybe, just maybe, the idea of divine justice is a comforting illusion. Maybe gods were invented to soothe our fears, to explain the chaos, to give hope where none exists. But illusions, no matter how beautiful, cannot substitute for truth. As Osho once said, God is not responsible. You are. And unless you take responsibility, you will remain a slave. Let us not hide behind scriptures and promises of afterlife justice. Let us face reality as it is. The world is not fair, and it's up to us to make it fairer. That is not a message of despair. It is a message of empowerment. We do not need to wait for divine intervention. We can be the justice we wish to see. Thank you for watching. If you found this video insightful, subscribe for more explorations of philosophy, science, and human belief.